growth requires more than capital.
Why do we call it the cheat code? Nobody said growth had to be fair.
Revenue solves everything.
Welcome to the cheat code. What was our fastest path to revenue?
We tend to like to do things the hard way.
What's the cheat code? It's giving yourself an unfair advantage over the others.
What is it that really works, and how are we going to grow these organizations?
That's our cheat code. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the cheat code. You know, in today's market, the outbound motion is more difficult than ever. We're in a recessionary environment. Not that outbound was ever easy. It's one of the hardest things that you can do as a part of your go-to-market motion. Companies are often wondering, when do I deploy an SDR? Do I deploy an SDR? Should I have full cycle sales reps? A million different questions when it comes to building outbound in a startup environment or any sales environment whatsoever, which is a great topic today. I'm Josh Wagner, alongside me, Justin Gray, for our guest, David Dulany, who's the CEO and co-founder of Tenbound. David, thanks for joining the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to talk to you guys.
Yeah, we're super excited to have you. So, you know, kicking it off, we talked a little bit there in the intro about just the outbound motion going to market. And, you know, Justin and I have our first couple of investments here within Revenue Capital. And one of the most common themes we see is, do we use an SDR or do we just use AEs? What's the right mix? What are your thoughts on that, just to get the conversation going?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that the dogmatic approach is looking almost like 20 years ago now, is the success that Salesforce had with building up their SDR program. And that's become sort of the Silicon Valley playbook that, you know, as soon as you feel like you've got some momentum, that people go out and start hiring SDRs. But, you know, just being in the business for a long time and understanding the nuances, it's not quite that simple. And one thing that comes to mind when I'm thinking about this is everyone's familiar with product market fit and the feeling of starting to get some momentum when you have product market fit. But what people don't talk about as much is go-to-market fit. And you know, it's kind of a way to understand, do you have the right go-to-market process in place? And then building out your team from there versus just adding SDRs to the mix.
Josh and I are smiling because, it's literally the thesis of our organization. Do you have product market fit with little to no go-to-market fit? That's an awesome investment for us. So talk a little bit about how you define go-to-market fit, because it's certainly one of those things that we say to early stage founders, and you can see that kind of like glazed look in their eye. And then we normally have to go in pretty deep around what that means to us. So curious as to how you define that.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to give full credit. I didn't come up with this. It was a guy named Tae-Han Nam who works at Storm Ventures, and he has actually written the book on it. So I would definitely, you know, look into that. Literally, yeah, and podcasts and all sorts of stuff. But I just, you know, I'm in the trenches a lot as a advisor and working with SDR teams. And so it just all of a sudden, you know, it makes more and more sense that once you've got product market fit is a feeling that you're getting inbound leads, you're getting referrals, you know, it's sort of self-generating to the point where it's like, okay, we're onto something here. You know, we've got something going. With go-to-market fit, it's almost like an experimental process. And the way that Nam describes it is you're surfing to some extent, and you're paddling. There's different waves are going by, but finally you find that right wave, you get right into it, and you're riding it out. And you feel that momentum behind it. So the simplistic way to think about it is, you're trying SDRs, you're trying AEs who do all their own prospecting, you're trying SEO and referral generated sales. And, you know, you're making bets across this go-to-market motion. And then finally something hits and you've got a repeatable motion, at least for the time being, until the market changes again. So, you know, taking it back to more realistic example is it's like, hey, we hired 5 SDRs. We bought them all the equipment, and they're going, and we're getting nothing back. What do we do? That's usually kind of where the conversation starts.
Which is we were having a conversation about this the other day, like such a detriment in terms of time, right? Like normally you make this investment that at least takes a couple months to find the right, initial seller, maybe build out those, other members of the team, SDR, BDR, whatever we want to call them. And then you realize like 2 or 3 months into that's not getting traction. It's not working. And you've got like 6 to 8 months now that you've given up in bookings traction. So like getting this right from the beginning is so critical. Talk to me a little bit about what that, like in the ideal stage, if someone hasn't already gone down and well, do they have to experience that pain before they can really understand that they need some help there, or that they need to take a different direction? Or is this something like in a utopian world, you can come in and kind of build out the right blueprint from scratch? Like, here's exactly what you need to do for your business.
Yeah, I wish, man, I would be retired right now if I knew. And that's what makes it really, really hard, because it's like you got to go out and fail fast, with your go-to-market motion, and try to see if you're getting that self-generated momentum from what you're doing. And so, take it like baseline example could be you have one salesperson who's like a Renaissance rep. So they're doing everything, and they're doing some prospecting. They're calling the inbound leads. They're working their database, and they start to get some traction in one of those areas. And so it could be they're starting to get some traction in outbound. They're really great about following up on leads. They're great with their referral selling motion. That's where you want to double down and start to build it out. And you could see if you were going a dogmatic approach, it's just like, okay, we have 2 sales reps. Now let's hire 3 SDRs. It's a little bit more nuanced than that, because it could be that you're getting some traction as a referral seller, and this Renaissance rep is really, really good at that. Build that out and start to do some experimentation with that motion, and put some money behind that, and see how far those legs can run, before you just follow the playbook.
Well, what you highlighted there, I think really amplifies the challenge for especially early stage founders, is they don't know what the expectation should be realistically of that hire, right? And should they just expect meetings? Should it be we're getting acceleration through some pipeline by inbound? Like you just mentioned a whole bunch of things that I think most founders don't even realize could be the role of an SDR, right? And it's interesting. I have an advisory role with an early stage startup company, and the founder, I'll give him credit, he let his SDR just go figure it out, like test the market. Where does the message resonate? Where does it not? And it was like basically trying to find an ICP by brute force, right? And hey, I mean, it was a cool method, and I just don't see many people having the patience for that. So how do you come in and level set expectations with founders of what should we be expecting to get out of this type of hire?
Yeah, well, it's a good opportunity. I mean, there's not a lot of firms like yours who are really focused on the go-to-market motion. So I think you guys it's a really interesting opportunity to be able to work with these companies, because there's this 99% of the world is focused on the product market fit. And it's like, once we find that, we're good, man, we're going to be good to go. But then what? Right. And so you can create like almost like a playbook of frameworks for the different companies, that there's going to be these stages that you go through in your development of finding go-to-market fit. And these are the patterns that we've seen over the many years that we've worked with these companies. And so let's fit your stage into where you are right now in this continuum. And it's like right now, all you are is 2 engineers with some funding, a great idea, and product market fit. Okay, what we usually see there is, okay, you want to get that Renaissance rep who can do everything and can, throw a bunch of stuff at the wall and see what starts to stick and then double down on that. But then you might have another company that comes in and they've hired 5 SDRs, they've got a bunch of sales reps, and nothing's working right now. And it's like, okay, we need to go into experiment mode at this point and really figure out, did we need SDRs at all? And did that experiment work? Because it looks like it hasn't. What could be a potential breadcrumb that we could follow, that could lead us to better success. So.
Yeah, I mean, so it's such an important question. To your point earlier, like everyone is still running, in my opinion, the same playbook overall, right? Like there's just far too much, and again, I'm speaking from opinion here, but I think there's far too much focus on hiring a quote unquote VP of sales as a first sales hire. I think there's a big focus on, SDRs solve all problems. And so what we see on our side, because we're so vertical SaaS focused, like oftentimes, SDRs may not fit in that business for many years because we're predominantly selling through a channel. We're getting a lot of exposure to, what we would call our ICP and even the SAM. So, I mean, are there some indicators that an organization can look at to say, yeah, my solution, where it's at in terms of maturity or the market size, or, just what are some of those key indicators that you look for that really, show the path to building out the beginnings of an SDR team?
Yeah. It's not to be too consultancy, but it's really nuanced based on the company. Yeah, I know. Dude, thanks. I'll send you my bill. It depends. but the trend that we've seen over the last few years is product-led growth motion, where you can get the product into their hand, they start to use it, and then they bump up against a paywall. And then it's a very marketing led motion, and it's probably, you've seen it with in your background, and that you can go up to a certain point, and you have to have some salespeople, but it's not as much of turning that corner to a sales led motion. But what you see is at some point the product led growth engine starts to sputter, and even the biggest product-led growth companies have this huge SDR sales organization, and they start to really focus on outbound and to try to figure out how to juice the product-led motion and turn it to a sales-led motion. So it's just there's that continuum of the go-to-market strategy that you see, based on where the company is.
You've mentioned the term Renaissance rep a couple of times, and I'm really digging it. So can you kind of define that for us? Because I do believe in the stage of company, especially that we're typically investing in, that's probably a lot of what we're looking for. So what do you mean when you say Renaissance rep?
Yeah, I mean, and if you've ever worked at startups, or I know Sean Kester is in the room, like there's those Swiss Army knife people, that come in right at the beginning, and they're roll up their sleeves, scrappy, hardworking, whatever it takes type of people, and very outgoing, out in the market, talking to people and understanding what works and what doesn't, from a very practical perspective. I mean, like, the runway is so short at a startup. You may just have a year or two to make it work or not. And there's absolutely no time for the kind of corporate mentality of, I just want leads, or, just wait for my SDRs I'll go complain about my SDRs. That's the worst. But now we're just getting into it. But anyway,
where do you think companies over-index in that environment? Like, I feel like that Renaissance rep, there's something where founders might over-index, whether it's industry experience or, I don't know. Do you see any pitfalls in that?
Yeah, I would take it from a completely different angle, as far as in my book, they don't need any industry experience. What they need is scrappiness and ability to be coached, and the curiosity and learning what works and what doesn't, and just an incredible work ethic, because it takes when you look at a rocket ship, like all the propulsion is in the beginning, right? Once it gets up into space, then you're good, and that's where you are in a startup. So you need somebody who can. It's not only just to sell for you and create pipeline, but it's to test the market and to understand the market, and then get that intelligence back into the go-to-market motion. So it's a critical. I would hire. And it's a unicorn type of position, but if you find the right person. I think of like I think his name's Sam Blond from Zenefits, and you go from this Renaissance rep situation at the beginning to now he's the SVP of sales in 10 years, because that's the type of person that you're looking for.
Yeah, so couldn't agree more. I think understanding your company stage, your market, what you need that rep to look like, and finding that hire is so critical. There's something else there as well, right? Like as they're running all those experiments, like you're getting a lot of information and data back. Like process has to, allow that information to live, as we begin to staff the team and kind of round things out and so on. So what do you see the most successful organizations doing with that massive amount of data and learning that's coming off that early sales team? Like, how do they really ensure that's going to have impact on the team as it expands?
Yeah, and this I wish I had like a more fun answer, but a lot of that is project management and really running like the scientific method, essentially. So sitting down and going, okay, we're going to try something for 90 days. You're in charge as the project manager to come up with the idea, run the play, and then track it over 90 days and come back and report on what happened. And it's basically the scientific method that's been around for centuries, which is you come up with a hypothesis, you experiment in the market, run that data back to in a report and understand what worked and what didn't, then double down on another hypothesis and continue that project forever, basically. It's much more fun to just buy something or hire a bunch of people or, throw bodies at a problem. But really it comes down to, the block and tackling.
Yeah, it's speaking of cheat codes, right? Like what I'm finding is that in really well-run startups and in organizations that are really getting traction, and you can see that kind of trajectory that's leading up into the right. One of the main differences between those and those that are not is also just organization. Like, are they bringing those learnings together in some semblance of a playbook? I really don't care about format, but like just ensuring that everyone is contributing back to that single source of truth, and that they're not losing that information over time. Like we're having a conversation a couple of days ago. We asked for, what do you have in terms of sales playbook or process? And we got like 50 different documents, and like one was like, well, we don't really use that anymore, but there's some good things in it. And it's just all over the board. And I'm thinking, how are they going to expect, a new seller to come into this environment and really get their arms around everything? So it's funny how those like unsexy or, the things that you don't see a lot of like blogs and articles and speaking opportunities around, like, are actually so critical in terms of project management, change management, documentation. Like that stuff, sucks to say like, hey, this is a big lever, but frankly it is.
Yeah, exactly. And this stuff doesn't get any clicks, right? And that's why it's much more fun to post controversial stuff and get a bunch of clicks and stuff like that. But really, it just comes down to like these boring topics. But one thing I learned, if you ever heard of the entrepreneurial operating system, and there's a book called Traction by Gino Wickman. Startups being chaos, one of the things that they really emphasize in their program is having a very operational person that's in the middle of the chaos and is the button down type A organized operator who can round up all the information and put it into a package that's usable and becomes that tribal knowledge for new people as you scale. And because if you think about it, like doing startups, it's pure chaos. I mean, you're running around trying to stay alive and do all the different things that you need to do to stay alive. And it's like the last thing anybody wants to do is actually organize this.
Yeah, document and organize. Well, and you touched on it a little bit, but like the feedback loop, I think you get a lot of feedback on product early on, and founders are really open to that feedback from their customers and whatnot, but you don't take the same level of rigor in terms of feedback from the market as you are maybe starting your outbound or testing some marketing messages or whatever. You're not taking that same level of rigor with the feedback loop and giving the organization an opportunity to learn from what they're actually seeing and feeling and hearing from people that aren't already customers that you can use to move things in a different direction potentially. Because you said experimentation. Well, that experimentation doesn't mean anything if you're not collecting the feedback and doing something with it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, most startup founders that you guys know are engineers, so they're coming from makes a lot of sense for them from a ones and zeros perspective. But they apply that to their product market fit, and they're putting all their energy back into making the product awesome. But as you've uncovered in your work, if nobody knows about it and there's no go-to-market fit, then you can have the best product in the world and it just dies. So you just got to put that same thoughtfulness into your go-to-market fit as well. So,
yeah, couldn't agree more. So as we're talking through this, it most startup founders, right? Like, all right, they've got to do all these things and they're hard, and there's always this glaring easy button sitting over there as well. And I get asked this all the time, so I want to know your thoughts around it. It just got bubbled back up because Lemkin the other day shared, I think, some old posts that they did on Sasser where they said only 7% of outsourced SDR teams are actually successful, or people consider them to be successful. And I get asked this all the time. Who do you recommend from an outsourced, BDR, appointment setting, SDR, whatever people want to term it? And I've stopped referring folks in that regard because I've had the same experience myself. I'm curious, how you respond to people that come with, that question, and what do you think about really any of these areas that we've talked about in terms of outsourcing?
Oh man, I mean that's another podcast right there, because that's to your point. It's like, this trying to figure this out is really, really hard. It's a major headache. It's not my thing. There's a whole industry of outsourced SDR companies. This is all they do on a daily basis. Let me give this whole thing to them and instant meetings, right? That's the dream. And also the barrier to entry to that outsourced industry is so low that you've got hundreds of players, right? Maybe thousands of players that are all basically saying the same thing. Let me take this headache off your plate so that you can focus back on the product, which is what you really want to do, right? And that 7% stat, it's really low. I mean, it's even to me as someone who deals with these companies a lot, I was surprised to see that. I don't know what the sample set was on that poll, but 7% is really low. And so, I look at those as it's another channel. We need to look at it as an experiment. And the two key things with those companies is really read the contract. Like, do not sign anything unless you actually read the fine print, because they're basically like a property management company. They want to just get the account in and never hear from you again and just keep billing you month after month as long as possible. And if you're not getting the results that you need from them, and it's not going well, sometimes they make it really hard to get out of the contract. So that's the thing. Number one is, if you're thinking about these companies, read the contract and understand it. Also know that you have a lot of leverage in negotiating contracts. And I'm sorry to all those outsourced companies, but the truth is that you as the customer is in the driver's seat at the beginning of those contracts. And so you can really dictate a lot of the terms. So number two is you've got to make sure that the intel, the intelligence that they're gathering on the market is even more important than the meetings that they set up for you, because they're learning what works and what doesn't in Outbound for you. And a lot of the companies, they keep it in a black box because that's their intellectual property, is how to do this. And they're not sharing the playbook back with you. So you're not getting all the learning from all the effort and money that you're spending to employ these companies. And so you got to make sure that anytime they're picking up any intelligence or they're understanding trends that are working in their outbound, that you know about it and it gets put back into your own playbook.
Yeah, I think that's, having, and I've contracted with, multiple groups in my past lives and past companies, and there is a distinctive difference between kind of that like wholesale, just again, like meetings as a commodity, and then the organization that really tries to make an effort. And that was the differentiator there. Although I wouldn't call any of those experiments that I've run successful, we did get a lot of information out of those efforts, right? Like we were meeting multiple times a week. If something came up, we had a direct line to the folks sitting in the seat over there, and they'd be asking like, hey, what do we say in this instance? Or, have you run into this before? It's just highly communicative. They were plugged into our CRM, our Salesforce.com instance, and we got a lot of good learnings from that experience. I mean, we also, one of those main learnings was it's really difficult to sell consulting through an outsourced SDR layer, and even an SDR layer, in my opinion, because people want to speak to someone with expertise, and it's really the expertise that's selling them, not anything else. But to your point, that's a learning, right? Like it seems like, hey, if we want to scale this, and we want our folks only, spend their time on qualified conversations and meetings, it seems like something that would be, a no-brainer to outsource. And again, to the point earlier, it wasn't. And so you've got to pivot fast and ultimately try a different avenue.
Exactly. Yeah. The intel is sometimes worth more than the meetings that you're gathering. And you got to make sure that you can get that. And these are experiments. Working with outsourced SDR companies, sometimes I've seen success with clients who have used them, and they get locked in and they become an extension of your SDR team. And they'll build an in-house team with this outsourced team, and they'll kind of cross-pollinate their intel and compete with each other. And there's always that little looming, like, this outsourced company produced this pipeline, but you guys haven't done anything this month. There's that tension that can help to improve performance. So I've seen it work in the past, but my main caveat is just you're dipping your toes, you're experimenting, you're 3 months, 6 months. And if that thing if it's not working and you're not completely satisfied with this experience, pull the cord and, move on.
Well, whether it's outsourced or not, one of the things that I'm just curious about is what's working. You can't open up LinkedIn and see that something's dead, some channel, some tactic, some this or that. What's not dead? What's alive? What's working? What's not?
Yeah. And everything's alive. Everything's alive. Nothing's dead. And again, I should post more like controversial opinions, stuff like that, but I think a lot of it is just BS, to get attention. Nothing's dead. Anything could work. What's dead is, or what's not happening is that detailed project management and experimentation for your particular market conditions and your particular product. that is what's dead and doesn't happen because it's just hard. It's a pain in the neck, and you have to go through a lot of rejection and no response and messages that aren't working well until you start to pick up a pattern that, hey, wait a minute, I'm on to something here. Let's build off of this success that we're having. So it could be in your industry that it's 100% cold calling. That's what works the best for you. It could be that there's no cold calling does not work at all, and it's all email and social media. It could be a combination of both. The fact is, unless you start to get some momentum, you just don't know.
Yeah.
Man, I could tell Josh was just wanting you to say LinkedIn voicemail and then drop the microphone and cut the call off because he's such an advocate for LinkedIn voicemail.
I love it.
The other thing too, like with the people that you guys are working with, they should be really careful. And this is a no-brainer, but be really careful about the advice that they're getting on like a LinkedIn or a Twitter, and double click on the person, whoever it is, because it's like duh, but a lot of times the anti cold call guy is selling a email course, for $19.99, or the video, specialist is working with a video vendor. I won't name any names, but it's out there, and stuff like that. So it's just like, give me a break,
Well, we were even just going through this exercise this morning, talking about our investment criteria, right? And part of that is looking at those companies and saying, who is their buyer? And not only who they are, but how accessible are they? And then where are they accessible? And that's your point, right? Like, do these people hide behind computer screens and you might be able to find them on a Reddit board? Or are they someone who picks up their phone? That example I gave you earlier, it's a software that sells into commercial real estate. Well, cold calling works pretty well because commercial real estate people pick up the phone. They think someone has a deal for them. So your pickup rate is really, really high, right? Whereas, Justin and I used to be in marketing. Marketers don't even they're like absolutely averse to phone. They're never going to pick up the phone. Not going to happen, right? So you got to find other channels like LinkedIn or whatever it's going to be. So I think if we think about the whole context of the show, big takeaways, right? Like experimentation, you even need to think of that SDR role through the lens of experimentation, not just going to come in and be this meeting machine, right? Like,
and consistent experimentation. Like I see too much. It's like, well, I sent a bad email the other day, and then I used this message for a couple emails. It's like, guys, we need some real consistency here in order to figure out what is working, what's not working. And so just those experiments can be controlled in time frame, but there does need to be a bit of a concerted effort to ensuring that we've got a data set that's meaningful.
Yeah. And the classic one is, hey, I tried cold calling and it didn't work. Okay, well, show me the data. Like show me the actual data of your experiment that you ran over the last 90 days. And it's like, when it comes down to it, I made 2 cold calls and they hung up on me both times, and I didn't like that. You know what I mean? So it's the Deming's quote. It's like everyone's, in God we trust. Everybody else needs to bring data, and if you don't have that, then you know what I mean. So.
But your point earlier about the intelligence is very underutilized, right? Like, sure, I made 2 cold calls that didn't work because they hung up on me. Well, they didn't work because your expectation was a meeting. Did they actually tell you something before they hung up on you that was valuable? They may have, right? But you didn't even know that's what you were looking for. So, there is a lot to be said for being able to set some expectations for success.
Yeah. And the last quick thing too with the startups is think about that operator role who's like the really type A organized, button down person who's in charge of wrangling the chaos and turning all this into something useful, because that's missing from most, and there's a lot of learning happening that just kind of gets left in the background and not reorganized into something useful. So
Yeah. So I guess if we were really wrangled today into top three, it would be, think of that SDR function, especially early on, as an experimentation tool. But in order for that to be successful, have a real feedback loop that you can use to analyze the data. I like that second one there of bringing an operator into the mix. It doesn't necessarily need to be an executive. It just needs to be that type A that pulls things together, right? And really build some structure around what it is you're doing. And that I love the if you're going to outsource, read your contract. That's a good one for me. So David, we appreciate you joining the show. Wondering for folks that are listening, if they want to find you, what is the best way to do so?
Yeah, absolutely. Just tenbound.com. There's a lot of information about exactly what we're talking about there. It's all free, ungated, and we'd love to see you. We're doing a virtual conference coming up next week, and we do those throughout the year. So we'd love to see you there.
Yeah, it's cool. We can put a link to that in the description. That's awesome.
Awesome. Well, David, thank you for joining the show. For those of you listening, if you like us, you like David, drop us a review on Apple or whatever your podcast platform is. That'll help expand our reach. And until next time, we'll see you there.